Hello and welcome to the Brothers of Dynasty, the best fantasy football podcast hosted by three brothers from Rhode Island who have all believed in James Conner from the beginning. Knew that guy could do it, knew that guy was going to be an absolute stud in Arizona.
Our rankings last week reflected that for sure.
Yeah, he clearly was in our top 12. I'm your host, Josh Christensen, joined as always by my two brothers, Jay and Andrew. Jay, welcome back to the live stream. What are you drinking today?
Yeah, back at the live stream. I'm drinking tonight. We've got, this is Night Shift Brewing, and this is called Haze Maze. It's got a nice maze on the front there for our video watchers tonight.
Solve it right now, real quick. Solve it, everybody.
Yeah, nope, made it to the center. And this is, a hazy double dry hopped IPA. So it is a great beer, and it's a great maze. Check it out.
Andrew, what are you drinking today?
No mazes or puzzles here. I got Sierra Nevada's Celebration. Fresh hop.
Yes, an oldie,
fresh hop,
but a goodie. And I just had one of those before moving on to this beer. So.
That's fantastic.
Moving on without any further drink introduction.
I'm not drinking anything new. It's my same cocktail. We don't need to talk about it.
You don't want to sand our beers? You just start talking about them more.
Well, I was gonna make another Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire joke about your beer, Jay's at the center of the maze is a port key that takes you to Voldemort. Oh, yeah, that's right.
How it works?
Poor, what is it, Cedric Diggory?
Yeah, Cedric Diggory.
Poor
Cedric Diggory is dead.
He was the heart of House Hufflepuff.
I told you I haven't seen the
movie. Jay's like, spoilers.
Yes, years and years later.
God damn it.
Like Jay is just thumbing through the Goblet of Fire.
I'm on page 25 of the first book. I'm almost there.
Just sighs and throws the book in the fire.
Oh yes, but that fireplace is a flue that takes you to Diagon Alley. Anyways, we're moving on.
When things go wrong.
The Brothers of Dynasty is a part of the Fantasy Football Collective network of podcasts. You can find the Fantasy Football Collective at FF_collective. That's collective with a K on Twitter for great content and other podcasts like the Fantasy Nightcap, the Fantasy Boardroom, and Collective Knowledge. So check that out. On today's live stream, we are going to be talking about Week 9 in the NFL, and then we're going to talk about our Dynasty quarterback rankings. But first, let's start with some quick injury news before we get to a couple big headlines from this last week. So we have Chase Edmonds' injury. He has a high ankle sprain, so we know those can be nagging and keep him out for at least a few weeks. So be mindful of that. Again, James Conner got a big workload after Chase Edmonds went down, so expect more of that with a little bit of Eno Benjamin next in.
There. Oh, yeah, your guy, Eno
Benjamin, yeah, I didn't get a lot of work, but did get a touchdown, and it actually looked pretty good.
He leveled a guy.
He did. He was pretty bruising. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Eno Benjamin kind of gets any sort of because they split a pretty good amount, but I would expect James Conner to get the vast majority of the carries and passing down work in that offense going forward, with maybe some Rondale Moore picking up some more of those backfield passing down work. Other than that, we had another COVID designation that's Nick Chubb, so he's out this week, I believe. And Kareem Hunt obviously on IR, so it's going to be the Dearness Johnson show again. It seemed like when he was the guy a couple weeks ago, he played really, really well, got a lot of touches, so he's going to be an RB2 for you this week. Other than that, Sam Darnold has a shoulder injury that doesn't seem to be concerning. But not any more concerning than his play, but
it's fractured scapula. That was the designation on it. That just
classic scapula.
Yeah, but it sounds like he's going to miss a few weeks.
It sounds like he's going to miss a few weeks. Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's what they're saying. I think I would expect PJ Walker to at least play this week. And then we'll take it, week to week, because they're not always forthcoming with their injuries too. In terms of it's always like, yeah, that guy's hurt, and I think he'll miss this week.
Yeah,
And then you have to
that's great.
Follow it, and Christian
That's
McCaffrey's practicing. Oh, he's gone. And
Yeah.
he's back.
Suddenly they land on the IR. Yeah, they're coming back, and they're on the IR.
Yeah.
Any other significant injuries or absences? I know we've got Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins are day to day. Some other
They
people I
missed the
think
game,
are.
and then hopefully they'll be back this week. And then Rodgers is one. Aaron Rodgers is one to watch, just because he can. Saturday is when he can actually come back if he has enough negative tests.
Which at this point,
for COVID,
yeah.
so.
At this point, he has not qualified to come off if he is eligible. So keep an eye on that. But let's move on to a couple storylines of the past week. And the big one that we need to get to is Odell Beckham Jr. released by the Cleveland Browns. That was announced last week. I believe it was on Friday that happened. It officially happened on Monday. As of 4:00 this afternoon, he passed. He was not claimed off of waiver, so Odell Beckham Jr. is a free agent and can sign with who he wishes. So that ends a tumultuous, to say the least, tenure with the Cleveland Browns, and he'll be a free agent for the first time in his career. Not exactly sure where the cap and team's interests lay out. I'm sure you'll hear a few names floated out there, but for fantasy purposes, and Andrew, I'll start with you on this. Where is your ideal OBJ landing spot?
I think he's expressed that he would like to go to, and I guess for fantasy purposes, I would agree that Green Bay might be an ideal landing spot for someone like him. Besides Devontae Adams, there's no one who really registers in as a number 2 that demands targets. And I feel like for someone like OBJ that, if we're being optimistic, still has the talent like that, possesses the elite talent. Whether he can put that into action, we'll see. I think that's a role that you would hope he could step into. And he's also someone that, being more of that type of diva receiver, I think no one's really going to challenge that target share. It's kind of all on him. So I don't know if sort of that mental part of the game comes in, like where he might get denied in that fashion. Because I feel like, and then also on top, just having a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers that can air it out to a receiver like him, I feel like that's just kind of the perfect situation. I don't know if I could imagine him going more to a place like I think in theory he could be well suited in like LA or a place like that, but I think they've got receivers there that already sort of command their targets, like your Robert Woods and of course Cooper Kupp. So even though that might seem at a glance like an ideal place to go to, I don't know that he fits in there that well, getting the type of target share he'd like to. So he has noted that he would like to go to a contender first and foremost, but obviously, like, the biggest issue that he had with Cleveland, because Cleveland is a contender, more or less, so obviously I think the two biggest problems were probably, one, he wasn't getting that target share that he thought he deserved, and I think there was just some rift I just don't think he respected Baker as someone throwing him the ball, which is why a spot like Green Bay makes sense for him, because there's going to be no COVID debacle and straight up idiocy aside, on a football perspective, everybody respects Aaron Rodgers on that thing. No, OBJ would not go in there. Sure.
As a player, for sure. Meanwhile, him consulting Dr. Joe Rogan, PhD, on his COVID-19 protocol is just, that's a whole nother thing entirely. But anyways, Jay, let's continue this. Any other desired landing spots from a fantasy perspective for you?
The Giants. No, I'm just kidding. Go back home.
That.
Go home, Odell. That would be funny. Now that it's in his control, that's definitely not happening. Now that he is a free agent and he can sign where he wants, I think the Packers are probably, from a fantasy perspective, the most. The other team that would intrigue me just from no wide receivers are really there is the Saints, which have been a team of interest. They've been floated around a bit, are a contender. Do not have a quarterback you would necessarily respect any more than Baker Mayfield, but they have really. Did you watch some of that game this week? Almost no one could catch a pass on that team. Drops all over the place. Trevor Siemian actually played okay in that game, and my God, Kenny Stills caught it. Did you see Kenny Stills?
I did see it.
It was out there.
Yeah. I mean, so if you want to take over the wide receiver room and you're Odell, you go to that team and you actually could be like the savior there. He's also obviously played in college down in Louisiana for LSU, so there's, familiar with the territory down there. So that could be a spot, and that's a team that could use an Odell Beckham because they could use really any talent at the wide receiver position.
Now, they're not actually competing really, but what would you guys think of a team like the Falcons, where obviously
they're
Ridley
in this playoff spot right now?
Are they? Okay, then I guess I was, because that kind of came to mind, but I feel like they've been, at least for the past few years, sort of underperforming, but with Calvin Ridley out for the foreseeable future, they have need of someone
the Greek god of what did Tommy Tipple
Zacchaeus?
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus.
Yeah. 2 touchdowns.
Russell Gage, like that's the guys they're working with there next to Kyle Pitts in the tight end spot. So I mean, they're certainly in need of a big receiver.
Yeah, there's a team that hasn't been floated out there. Not saying that couldn't happen. I would like that probably just from a quarterback perspective more to throwing to Odell, but I haven't actually heard them floated out there that much. But they are. That 7th seed is wide open over in the NFC. It really is open in the AFC too. It's just we'll see what record gets it done there. Seattle's been floated around a lot. Seattle's crowded for a fantasy perspective too, because I've heard them come up a lot, but I don't know if that's just Pete Carroll talking, and I don't know. I think Odell said he wouldn't mind that, but it's just a weird spot for fantasy purposes, just for how those targets go around.
I mean, the reality is they can want him, but Odell ultimately has the power to sign with who he wants to sign with. I mean, the team that I think that you hear the most that gets floated a lot is the Raiders. Obviously, no more Henry Ruggs.
Jackson, so that.
But I don't know.
I mean, that's
it's also another spot where it's is he gonna love Derek Carr that much more than Baker? It's just.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do get the impression that Derek Carr is a generally respected football player.
I think maybe on a personal level, but I just. If maybe the make or break thing for Odell is feeling well, I can go places where there's opportunities for me or they need someone, but there's probably part of him that's I've never played. I played with Eli. Did he play with Daniel Jones? I'm kind of blanking before leaving. And then Baker, there's part of him that could be washed up Eli and then a Baker who I don't respect, but that's the one thing, the common denominator that if I just go somewhere with a respected quarterback, we'll include Seattle, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, or say for my example, Matt Ryan, I feel he could get behind that, but I don't know if even though people like Derek Carr, if his talent sort of commands what Odell's looking for.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what offers are out there and where he goes. Because, of course, then the other thing is the money. Money talks, obviously, as he goes for the rest of the year. But ultimately, this is a prove-it deal for him, because then he'll be a free agent in the offseason as well. And he's going to want to get paid. So, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I mean, just from a fantasy perspective, I do like the idea of him ending up in an offense like Green Bay. Even Seattle, I think, is fine. I think maybe another team that I would like to see is maybe the Chargers. The Chargers, I think, could use another wide receiver in there. I mean, if you're not sold on Mike Williams to this point, I think that makes a little bit of sense there with really kind of adding another weapon for Justin Herbert as we go along. But let's move on to just a quick throw out there. Do you guys have any other storylines from this past week that you guys wanted to bring up?
Well, I will just say overall, it was really a week from hell for a lot of teams.
Yep.
A lot of horrendous fantasy production from a lot of stars that you would count on. The Dallas Cowboys as a whole, the Buffalo Bills as a whole. What other teams were terrible?
The
The
Chiefs,
Packers game,
even though they
whole.
won, they're lucky Rodgers wasn't playing, because there's no way Rodgers would have lost that match again the way. That
No way in hell. I mean, 13-7
They got a
game
pass
against Jordan Love, who literally couldn't complete a pass. Jordan Love was basically chucking it out of bounds on out routes to Devontae Adams the whole time. So
it was terrible. I heard the Chiefs had a total 237 yards. They were pretty abysmal. So it's how they won that game.
It really came down to just basically that Rodgers missed the game. It was basically backwards land. I mean, Raiders, a contending team, come in, they can't do anything versus the Giants. That really wasn't a great game for fantasy purposes. You had a lot of points coming out of there. So it's basically a lot of games like that this week where you kind of just have to chalk it up to teams have bad games. We hadn't even mentioned the Rams. They were a disaster versus the Titans. Just
at least the Titans are good, but not.
Yeah,
not
no time to throw.
Good.
There was basically no offensive line play in that game.
Oh yeah,
it was just a debacle for a lot of teams outside of a couple that performed. But man, just not a week you kind of have to forget for fantasy and don't make rash decisions from this week in terms of evaluating players.
Sell Josh Allen, sell.
Do you guys feel like it's sort of better that a lot of people failed on the same week? So it's you can't sell on all of it. Well, because if one person just kind of really bombed out this week, maybe you could feel bad. But when so many stars fell off, I feel like it's easier to sort of be this seems like an aberration. This just feels like a weird week.
It was a weird week.
Yeah.
You forget some that happened. You can't even keep them all straight in your head.
It's a week that makes
it's just I can't push it all through.
No, it's a week that makes you say, why even try analyzing fantasy football? Nobody knows anything. What is the world? It would just be it's an existential crisis.
It's better week 9 than week 15, so.
Well, yeah, that is true. Although we'll have something weird happen week 15. Just count on it.
We will.
It's a notorious week.
I've never liked week 15.
Yeah, Andrew hates that week. But it's only
Jamal
the
Charles week.
First round of the playoffs.
Yeah, luckily I'll have a bye in all my leagues, and I won't have to face that. Now it's gonna be
Jamal Charles signs with the Baltimore Ravens. Oh no!
And goes off for 400 yards and 17 touchdowns. Let's move on. Let's rank some quarterbacks, guys.
All right, agreed.
Yeah, speaking of quarterbacks that are horrible, let's start with
exactly
in the top 5.
Yeah, you know who's not going to make our top 5 or top 12 or top 20? Jordan Love. That was not a good debut.
Granted, you can't judge a guy, I guess, after one game, but maybe in this case we can. I don't know.
I don't know.
It was bad.
It was really bad.
I pasted 35 quarterbacks ranked into this list. Jordan Love's not in there, so.
I can't remember where he is. It doesn't really matter. We're not going to get to him anyways.
We'll talk about him in relation to the Rodgers, maybe. But
maybe a little bit.
Come up.
Let's start with our top 2, and I think this was our consensus top 2, and that was Patrick Mahomes at number 1 and Josh Allen at number 2. Andrew and I both had Patrick Mahomes at number 1, but Jay, you made the switch, and Josh Allen is your number 1 dynasty quarterback.
Josh Allen still almost scored more points than Patrick Mahomes.
This week was the nail in the coffin for Mahomes.
I think it was 10, and what did Josh Allen have? They each did not do well this week, but overall.
No.
But the reason why, if you want to get my reasoning behind the switch, and I have a pretty solid, I think it's a top 6 that is pretty much a tier. And when you're drafting at the top of Superflex drafts and Dynasty startups, you really can't go wrong. It's kind of splitting hairs between about 5 or 6 guys that you can really build your quarterback core around. The reason why I went with Allen is really the rushing. It kind of puts him over the top, and a little bit of the trend lately. We're going even back to last year. Josh Allen averaged, if you don't kind of count the week 17 where the Bills weren't necessarily trying in that game, he's averaged more points than Patrick Mahomes since week 1 last year to this point. So he's already kind of outperforming him from a fantasy perspective, and he just offers a little bit more of a floor that we've seen Patrick Mahomes, we were just talking about it last week, his floor has kind of lowered a little bit. We've seen chinks in the armor, a guy that just seemed like he could never have a bad game, even if they were a little bit off. He always could sling it, find Hill or Kelsey, and have a good fantasy day. That has kind of not been the case this year. He's had bad games. I'm not saying that quarterbacks can't have bad games, but he has shown the ability to have kind of a lower floor in terms of when he has an off week.
Yeah.
Whereas Josh Allen's rushing, if you can add that rushing ability, that kind of ups the floor, where I'm probably more comfortable going forward if I have to choose between the two guys, going with a Josh Allen, who's a year younger, just negligible age difference here. It's not a big deal, but and still offers that upside of a guy who slings it. That guy is not really that different from Mahomes from a perspective of chucking it down the field and things like that, and can rush a little bit better, and is a tank in terms of rushing, a guy that can really bring it in that area and score touchdowns. So that's why he slightly edges out Mahomes for me at this point for number 1.
Yeah, we've talked about this on the show before, but it's just it hasn't been a good trend line this past, especially the past 4 weeks, where Mahomes has been QB 22 over the past 4 weeks.
It's like a weird slump.
Bad.
Like, I don't know what
it
is. Yeah.
Which again, like, I don't think it's at any point where we're making knee-jerk reactions and dropping him way down our list, but like it just keeps happening. Like, he just keeps performing poorly, and like the decision making's not there. He's among the lead lead in turnover worthy throws. So he's putting the ball in positions where he can turn it over. The offense is not clicking on the same way. It seems like defenses have kind of like got a decent playbook. I mean, a lot's been made of the like 2 deep safety, like cover 2, and like dare them to kind of like pick you apart little by little or run the ball. And then Mahomes is still throwing into double coverage and making bad throws. So, at some point you need to see him rectify this, or like the conversation eventually you start having a real conversation about like his value. I don't know when that point is. We're nowhere close to it. I think it would have to be, the rest of this season plus the beginning of next season. Like, if he like
season, he could fall to the bottom of this tier. I don't think that's out of the realm. Where
and that's because I think this is a really, really good.
It's a really good tier. It's not even like a knock on him. It's just like, these other guys are good, so I have a problem with going with him. So yeah.
No, and if he's like right now, I think he's QB 9 on the season by average points, and he's only got 3 top 10 finishes as a dynasty as a fantasy QB. And like I said, wide receiver QB 22 over the past 4 weeks. But let's move on to the next group of names that we have here. So we all had the same top 6 in slightly different orders, but I think we all agree on this tier. So the next 4 guys in order of our consensus were number 3, Justin Herbert, number 4, Lamar Jackson, number 5, Kyler Murray, and number 6, Dak Prescott. So a few of these names we've hammered out before. We've talked a lot about Justin Herbert. I think we all are on board with what he can do. Andrew has made his case for Dak Prescott several times in the past. We all love Dak Prescott. The name that's kind of risen back up here is Lamar Jackson. So Andrew, I think you had you moved him up into that tier, into the back of this tier for you. I believe you were lowest on him preseason. By lowest, I mean like 9 or 10 or something like that. Not terribly low, but we've all kind of
I think we sort of had a conversation where he was a guy who sort of fell below some of the running backs that you guys in a super flex startup would have opted to pick him over. And I think that's where our preseason conversation sprang from.
Yes, yeah, that was kind of the conversation. But he's done everything to kind of move himself back up into that elite tier he was in after his MVP season. So, talk a little bit more about your reasoning behind moving Lamar Jackson back up.
Yeah, I think last year was sort of a wake-up call to what seemed like it could be the worst case scenario for someone like him, maybe creeping back in with some of the inaccuracy, not always being able to put the play on his bat and just like go with it, though still, despite a lack of success maybe NFL wise, I think he still put up really good fantasy totals, but it still was enough for me to be a little more wary of him after one season coming back to earth, reverting to the mean. But going into this year, I feel like he's just moved back towards more of that upside. And the more you watch him, the more you just feel it's like this guy can do anything. I mean, we could talk about but it feels like there's a continuous adjustment of that system through him that just seems to keep getting better. Maybe last year was like a downward adjustment, but like it just feels so dialed in the way that offense works. And it seems like they're just never at it. It's like they could be 3rd and 15 and just bust out play like that, just kind of work all of that out. So yeah, I feel like he's, after a low last year, he's creeping back towards more of that 2019 value that you saw in him. And though I'm still a little weary about the long-term value of someone who plays as physically and runs as much as him, probably takes more hits than some of the other guys do. I think I maybe take that into account, putting him at the bottom of this tier. I think he's just sort of undeniable as a talent right now, in he has to be considered in with those other guys.
Yeah, it's honestly, the running was always like the case for him. Like he's on pace for another like 1,200 yards this season. That's never going to go away. But like you were alluding to, last year he was really inconsistent as a thrower. Ended up in the season with I think 2,700 yards. I think he had under 20 passing touchdowns, and really even in like he had some inflated numbers in his in terms of efficiency in his MVP season with 35 touchdowns, but still a pretty low attempt amount. That's not the case this year. This year, he's throwing the ball, and he's throwing the ball well. That's been the most impressive thing. Like
seeing someone like Marquise Brown get involved on a consistent basis is great.
Mark Andrews is doing well. Yeah. Rashad Bateman getting in there, but he's on pace to obliterate his passing attempts, passing completions, passing yards, and yards per attempt. All 4 he's set to obliterate those totals. So, like, the fact that he's taken such a big step forward as a passer is the biggest thing to me, because we all know the rushing floor is there. We all knew he was going to be a top 5 threatening QB whenever he was healthy, but you were worrying about could he get it done as a passer, and that's what adds longevity. Jay, anything to add?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Lamar is my favorite guy on this list to look at, because I started looking at him and Kyler Murray, and we can maybe talk about Murray a little bit more in a second. I'm like, there's no reason why Lamar shouldn't be over Kyler Murray in my mind.
I came to the same thing.
I guess I'm not there yet, but like that's sort of compelling.
He's a better rusher. He's going to double Murray's attempts from rushing this year. And then what you guys just said, the passing this year, he's on pace for 565 pass attempts this year. 565, which is insane compared to what he had been doing before. He's throwing, and he's throwing well, and he's actually never really been that bad from a completion percentage. I actually think that gets overblown. He's actually been around 65% almost every year, except for his first year. Even last year,
it's never been. It's never been about that. It's been about the amount of attempts, usually. And it's also just been like the eye test sort of thing. He's making plays that he wasn't making before as a thrower.
So like when you compare him to Kyler, it's like, well, why? Like the rushing floor of Lamar is kind of nuts. Like this is a guy who almost always has a good game. Like his floor is insane. And Kyler is talked about as a rushing quarterback, which he is. He ran it a lot last year, but he is on pace for way less this year than he was last year in terms of rushing attempts. And we've seen Kyler, we're worried about Lamar getting hurt. Kyler's the one who's been getting banged up. That's the one that doesn't seem like he can withstand the rushing quite as much. He has now an ankle. Last year it was a shoulder. I'm not saying like that's going to be recurring, but I think that's a guy where this year we've seen it trend down in terms of how much they're letting him run. If that continues, I still like him, but I like him more than the mold of like a Russell Wilson, who runs, but only kind of when he needs to. Lamar runs because he can run, and they design runs all over the place for him.
There's
He's
mobile
different.
quarterbacks, and there's
Oh,
guys like
he is that.
like Lamar,
Well,
and there's guys like Michael Vick, like that, like these are like there's a different. I don't know what you'd call like the tiers of like quarterbacks. It's just like non-mobile, mobile, runner, and then there's like
almost
Lamar.
a tier by himself. Like there's really no one else like him.
Non-mobile, mobile, T-Mobile.
There's different. There's levels. Dead, non-mobile.
It goes Ben Roethlisberger, dead.
Dead's a level up.
Kyle Trask. Oh my God, that 2-yard run.
Generic corpse.
That's where I know. But getting back, like speaking specifically about the mobility, I mean, I don't. If Lamar Jackson wasn't in the league, I think we'd all assume that Kyler Murray would be bar none the best runner in the league. But like, we have never seen a rushing quarterback like Lamar Jackson. That's including Michael Vick. We've never seen one like Lamar Jackson. No. It is crazy. Well, Kyler Murray is a great running quarterback, but it's not just the speed for Lamar Jackson. His vision and his ability to make guys miss is...
He doesn't really get hit as bad as
in
spots he does, but not any worse than like Josh Allen when he gets like Josh Allen takes hits.
Josh Allen takes some hits. Like, that worries me a little bit, but he's huge. He's a tank.
He can handle it a little better, but like Lamar hasn't really gotten banged up. That can happen. I mean, we were just talking about with Derrick Henry. Man, this guy doesn't seem to get banged up. Like we keep waiting for Lamar to get hurt, and like, well, that could affect his rushing, and like that hasn't really happened.
That was our thought about Derrick Henry, but the
fact that his passing has improved makes you go, well, maybe it doesn't matter as much if his rushing took a tiny hit.
Yeah, what happens if he loses a step? One, I think him even losing a couple steps
is still
probably really good. He goes from a guy rushing for 1,000 to 1,200 yards a season to a guy who's rushing to 500 to 600 yards a season. And if he continues this trajectory with his passing, he's still going to be a top 8, top 10 guy, which is why the passing is what makes me move him back into that tier 1, because then the question of can this guy have longevity regardless of injuries, age, attrition is answered a little bit more, and that you don't have with a guy like Jalen Hurts, who hasn't shown that progression as a passer right now. But let's move forward to our next set of guys, and I think this was all fairly consensus tier for us. I had some slight deviations, but in order, number 7 through 10, we have Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers here. And the biggest one I have a disagreement on right now is Joe Burrow this high and over a few of these guys from the two of you. So, Jay, I want to go back to you. You had Joe Burrow as your number 7, highest of all three of us. I had him back at 10. Andrew, you had him at 8. So why Joe Burrow this high?
I don't know. Why not? He's playing better than Trevor
Lawrence.
No, he's the best set of weapons. Is one of the best set of weapons in the game. From you have Joe Mixon, who's good back and can catch passes. You have Jamar Chase, who might be the best. I mean, according to just how he's valued in fantasy leagues, is the best receiver of all time. And T. Higgins, who's not bad. I mean, he's okay.
He's all
not too shabby. Tyler Boyd. Joe Burrow. I mean, he's young. He hasn't, necessarily cracked top 5 in terms of numbers, but I mean, this year so far, he's averaged, what is he, 13th in
he's
overall?
QB 13 overall.
So, but he is right in a mix of guys almost around the same points. He's averaging over 18 points a game. He's right around Aaron Rodgers, who's at 19, Russell Wilson, that's 19. So he's not like that far away from other guys that are in the top 12. So he's essentially.
But I also feel like, especially in these past few weeks, he's poured it on. Like if you're looking thinking
reported
more
on
from like a week 4 forward. Like when you could say there was some adjustments early, but if we're looking even more recent, I think he's more averaging over 20 points.
Yeah, and there's been some bumps in the road, but for me, just a guy who has shown flashes of really high level play for fantasy purposes, and that set of weapons and the age of a guy who's not, Russell Wilson's 34, he's 24. Next year he'll be like 25. So it's a guy that you could kind of build around as he's not in the top echelon yet, but there's actually still growth there. It's only his second year, and he missed most of last year. So this is not necessarily peak Joe Burrow, where he could progress to. So banking that in as well, I'm more comfortable kind of maybe I feel like I can build around him, maybe sacrifice a little bit versus a Russell Wilson early, and then back end year 2, 3, he's ascended beyond Russell Wilson. That's why I have him this high.
Yeah, I have him below Trevor Lawrence, Russell Wilson, and Matthew Stafford, and the reason is I think it's just an upside play. So he is QB 13 so far this season. I think he's really good. He's my number 10 guy. I think he looks terrific. It's just projecting out the skill set there. He doesn't necessarily have the biggest arm in the world. Like he's gonna have a couple shots a game to Jamar Chase down the field, but he doesn't have the arm of a Stafford or a Herbert or a Josh Allen who can consistently take more shots down the field. And he doesn't really have much rushing upside, although he's a fine athlete. I don't think you're ever going to see him rushing for more than like that 150 or so amount there. And yeah, he has all these things going for him this year, but he's still QB 13. I just don't see the ceiling being there for him, where I know Russell Wilson and Matt Stafford have a bit of a higher ceiling going forward. They're still young enough where I'm not necessarily concerned about them falling off a cliff anywhere in the next 4 or 5 years. And then I'm just playing a kind of projection game with Trevor Lawrence where like I'm sticking by my guns on the pedigree and the projection there with what I think Trevor Lawrence will be. And I just don't see the same upside for Joe Burrow, who I think is like Joe Burrow is like your ideal, like the highest level QB2 that you could have. Like if he's my QB1, I'm fine. But if I'm a contending team in a super flex league and Joe Burrow's my QB2, I feel fantastic about that, because I think his floor is super duper safe, because I think he's going to be a consistently efficient guy. The week in and week out ceiling, I just don't think is there as much. And that's what caps him for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like he's quite as capped as you do. And I don't know that having a big arm is necessarily like one way to get around. I expect him to be able to succeed by being an efficient quarterback and having all that talent around him. Were he to sort of lose some of that, like, I don't know if that caps his value then. I don't like to buy too much into the situation around him, but the situation around him is pretty great. I also feel like, yeah, probably based on what Jay was saying, I do buy into the age. I wouldn't hold a few years against him, but some of these other guys that like the Staffords and the Wilsons that one might have over him, 10 years, I think, is enough where I'm going to start in the quarterback realm to hold it against that. Like, I don't know that I feel good in a startup coming out with like a quarterback as my QB1 who's mid-30s. And like, I want to be able to come out with a guy that I can at least project to have maybe 8 to 10 years in them. And I just don't know that I can do that with one of those guys. And I also don't really take for granted some of the stuff preseason with someone like a Russell Wilson, where he didn't shoot his way out of 10, but he really sort of made a weird case for himself.
I'm not worried about that.
I'm a little worried about that. I don't really like, and like it kind of got swept under the rug. Like I know that he doesn't have a strong enough personality to maybe have burnt a bridge, but like, I don't necessarily think that sits that well. And if he ends up going somewhere else, I don't know that another situation is better than the one he's built in Seattle. So that still sort of sticks in the back of my mind. But also I would like to shout back to our first tier there that you and Jay, based on what you said about Lamar Jackson, you you definitely convinced me, and I officially on the spot changed him to over Kyler Murray.
Nice. Yes, that's what.
Yeah,
this
I mean,
show's
it
for.
just
Yeah, has that ever happened on a live pod? Someone was just like, you know what? I was wrong in that.
Well, you have to put him over
Dak.
Dak. You have to put him over Dak too.
Oh, see, I'm not going to put him over Dak. But I have an inflated take of Dak, so whatever.
Because all that applied to Dak too. So no.
No, it didn't.
No, it didn't apply to Dak, but it actually just circling back to Dak, and we've talked about this before. It's just like I have him at the end of my tier one simply because I think like when the Cowboys are at their best, they're a balanced offense, and so I just think he has it's like
Which he's at the center of.
he's at the center but
he doesn't really rush.
he doesn't really rush as much. Like he
But-
scrambles a bit, and they're pretty much a 50-50 split in terms of rushing and throwing the ball right now with
Which is good.
Elliott and Pollard, which is great. Their offense has been really, really good. And
this
he's
week.
got not this past week. So, but it's just he's got all but 2 games that are over 20 points, but no
Yeah,
games
he's
over
been
30
good, yeah.
points. He's just been like a super high
Had a little
floor
injury,
guy.
too.
Joe Burrow
Yeah, he had the
could be in
calf
that
thing.
vein. That might be a similar, like that might be the trajectory there for Joe Burrow.
Possibly.
Non-rushing Dak is the.
I think that's his. I think that's his ceiling. I think that's kind of like where he gets to. That he's just like the safest floor guy. I'm just like. Then the reason why I bring up the arm and the rushing is because it's just like I'm looking for paths to victory. A reason why I have like Justin Herbert as high as I do is because like we've seen him be able to make explosive plays down the field with consistency.
Oh, yeah.
And although he's not rushing the ball as much as he's not rushing the ball a ton, he is a Josh Allen light athlete. He is deceptively fast. He's a big guy, and he's good in that read option game. And you saw it on the touchdown run the other day. And I like projecting that hopefully he'll do a little more of that going forward and go from the guy who's going to be, what he was last season to a guy who's getting more towards 500 yards rushing on a season, that 400 to 500 yards rushing on a season, getting that 5 to 10 touchdowns on the ground a season, which I believe he was around, I think he had 5 or 6 last year overall. And that's why I project such a high ceiling with a guy like Herbert. In fantasy, even though like I love Joe Burrow as an NFL quarterback, for fantasy, I think he's just more of a back end QB1 long term.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't have him anywhere near Herbert and probably never will, I hope, because Herbert is one I wanted to almost put at number 1 because like he's probably my favorite, and him and Lamar are like my preferred draftable guys, because like then you're down a little bit. Maybe you're drafting him at 4 or 5 in a super flex startup.
Oh, yeah.
And
But that's
then
what I
you
like.
get to,
That's more. That's
I like
more
that
startup
sweet spot,
strategy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, because it should be, if you're in a super flex league, it's more than likely going to be Mahomes, Allen, 1-2. And then I think you have a chance, like you at least have a chance that Herbert's going to be
People
there
like
around
Murray. I've
6,
seen
7.
Murray go high, so there's you
Yeah.
can get some value with your second pick and still get potentially the best quarterback at 5.
Yeah.
Nice.
But like similar, it's like, if the Mahomes trend continues, I will have no problem necessarily putting Herbert over him. If that trend continues, there's just no reason to put Justin Herbert over Josh Allen at this point, because I think they are similar in the way, although I think Justin Herbert is a better decision maker at this point with the football. I think Josh Allen has a bit of that gunslinger mentality, but in terms of arm talent and in terms of athleticism, Josh Allen is like where you hope, particularly in the athleticism part, where you hope Justin Herbert will get to. And then even like, I think there is even more room for him to be a truly special passer in the game. Like just watch Justin Herbert's my favorite player to watch. He's so fun to watch. Just a beautiful, beautiful passer. Let's move on to another guy. We didn't let's talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers, because we have him consensus.
Is a whole thing.
Yeah,
and
consensus
Lawrence is kind of a whole thing too.
Yeah, let's focus on those two guys, because in our consensus it goes. Yeah, it goes Aaron Rodgers at 10, Trevor Lawrence at 11 in our consensus, and Justin Fields at 12, who I think we're all just about the same on. Although I think Andrew and I both have Aaron Rodgers at Aaron Rodgers at 12 with Justin Fields just ahead of him. Jay, you're the reverse of that with Lawrence also behind Rodgers.
Right.
My internet blipped out for a second, so I'll repeat that question. Jay, unpack Aaron Rodgers for us in your thinking with his ranking.
Yeah, he's one. I could be right with you at 12. The reason why he's a tough one for Dynasty, and we were talking about this last year. He's really
you feel
hard
like you're
to
fighting
rank.
that cliff, right?
Yeah, you compare, you're just like, how long will it last? So he's obviously next year he'll be going into a year where he's 38 and 39. He turns his birthdays during the year. So that's the season he'll be doing next year. But what we've seen last year was a MVP season, top 5 quarterback. And this year he has been just as good. There's really no decline in his play. Especially from a fantasy perspective. If you don't count week 1 this year, which was like a really weird week.
Kind of an outlier.
Had like a 1-point week. If you throw that one out, because I'm counting that as an outlier, he's averaged almost 22 points a game. He's 7th overall. So this is a guy who's still getting it done at a high level. You could almost lump Brady into this group too, because it's like what I'm going to say about Rodgers almost applies to Brady, who's the number 1 quarterback this year.
Well, that's where the logic falls out the window, because it's like suddenly, why not Brady?
Why not Brady? But like, how long can Rodgers play? So we could talk Brady maybe in even another day, because like he's one I almost like. I don't even know what to do with that. But
I don't know.
You're thinking you can get 3 years. Say you can get 3-4 years out of Rodgers. Say he plays to 41, 42. And if he can play near this clip, that is high level. That's a guy who has great trade value. It's a guy you can actually build around, where everything's projection with Fields and Lawrence. That's the only issue with them. And anybody you go below that, it's even more of question mark. Does Jalen Hurts keep his job long term? Does Trey Lance develop into a quarterback? There's
does he
lots
get any
of
playing time?
I love Lawrence and Fields.
Yeah.
We all love them this year. I only bumped them down a little bit because I hadn't seen enough flashes. Like, you want to see something. Lawrence, it's just been rocky. We could talk about him more in a second. But compared to Rodgers, I was like, I know what I'm getting. If I draft Aaron Rodgers, I can compete next 2 years with him as my quarterback, and maybe 3 or 4, depending on how long he wants to play and whether there's any fall off there, in terms of play, which you just don't know. Breeze played till around 41, 42, and obviously declined, but I think Rodgers, for one of the best, fantasy quarterbacks ever, consistency-wise, I'm still willing to roll the dice there, and I know I can trade him if my team's not that good, and I can definitely compete with him, so that's why he edges out there. It's just the uncertainty is the thing. Where is he going to play next year?
Yeah.
Could he quit? He's a guy that kind of does what he wants, as we've seen.
Yeah.
He does not, obey by certain any norms or anything like that. So he could just decide he wants to go surf in Hawaii next year and not play anymore. And who knows? He could do that. But if he goes to another team, I don't even think that's bad, because the teams that have been courting him and where he was connected to would be great circumstances. He goes to Denver next year, I think that might be better in terms of having multiple receivers and things like that. So I think even if he leaves Green Bay, he would still be like a top 10 quarterback. So I don't even worry about that. It's just whether he quits for some reason. That would be my only worry. And I don't know what your thoughts are there, Andrew, if you're worried about that as well.
No, I really agree with your thoughts isolated to Rodgers himself and him being able to maintain value. Yeah, Denver is a great example. And honestly, I think look back at this game where Jordan Love was playing with that Packers team as is. The drop-off you see, it feels very similar to the drop-off that you saw in that Indianapolis Colts team when they first lost Peyton. And you're just this is...
They went Curtis Painter was the backup or whatever? Was that?
Yeah, you're like, this team is almost like a disgrace.
That's why they got Andrew Luck. They were the worst team in the league.
Yeah. It was a bad NFL product to put on the field, and you sort of see that in seeing that. My thought is Rodgers going anywhere else, I can't see him falling up. Be like, I don't know if this will be a good situation. If he went to Houston, I don't know that would be a worse situation than he had. Like, there's probably an argument.
That might be. Well, they still have Brandon Cooks. Yeah. But like you see, Carolina, who are the ones who need quarterbacks? Washington football team, Carolina, Denver. I like a lot.
I like all those
receivers
better
on those teams. Like, they're good. So
yeah. Devontae's great, but I think I like the overall situation in a lot of these other places better. I guess my other thought is that Rodgers is just a further continuation of the logic I was saying before against a Russell Wilson or Stafford, against Burrow, is that if I'm building a startup, and these are my ultimate rankings of how I would like to build a team, I still think I'm going to go with the more projection of Lawrence in Fields over him, because if best case scenario, I'm getting 4 years out of Rodgers and possibly only 2, I don't want to be wasting a top 2 pick on a guy that's not going to be on my team in a few years. I feel like I'm much more likely, and this might be more situational to say, but in a startup, quarterbacks are falling more in that 7 to 12 range. You're probably getting with a second round pick in Superflex. So I feel pretty good about taking someone like a Jonathan Taylor or a Jamar Chase in round 1 and pairing them up with someone like Lawrence or Fields in the second round, if that's what it takes, and having more of that plan for the future in the startup. I'd feel a little bit worse grabbing like a young player and then grabbing a guy who might be an expiring asset. That would worry me a little bit, at least from a team building perspective. But again, I still think I do think it's compelling that, at least from a short-term perspective, Rodgers is still so good, and no matter where he lands when he leaves Green Bay, Fry's still very good and really gives you that redraft upside. But from team building, I guess it's just my preference to go for the younger player there.
Yeah, I tend to lean with you, Andrew. And again, we've talked about this on the show before. Like, there's really a need to be on, as my dog scratches the back of my head.
What does Penny think?
That's a
Sorry,
great
Penny.
shot.
Come here. I'll have her here. Yeah, in terms of our rankings, because if we're talking about what our contender rankings are versus what our just base dynasty value players are, I think then Aaron Rodgers goes up for me, because his main boost of value obviously comes from what he can do for you right now, which is give you high level play, which is the problem with Fields and Lawrence right now. They're not going to help you win a championship this year. But I've seen enough from them, also knowing their pedigree, my whole evaluation of their college tape and what they bring to the league, to put them up that high and believe in what they can give you long term there. I think both Lawrence and Fields have top 5 dynasty quarterback upside and redraft quarterback upside. I think that's in the realm of possibility, and I've seen the flashes of that this year. Just look at Justin Fields last night on Monday Football.
Last night, yeah,
he was really good. Yeah, and
Once
you saw the rushing.
Going,
yeah, and you saw the rushing upside the week before.
In a row, so 2 weeks of
and against a tough defense.
Yeah.
Steelers
were bringing defense, it early.
Most people were like, he was good last week. I prepare to be disappointed this week. Actually, put up a really gutsy performance on the road.
I actually have been more impressed. Like, Lawrence is the one where, like, are we worried a little bit? I'm not. It's only 8 games.
No,
but man,
no, I'm not worried at all, because I'm like. I understand the stat lines are not there.
Stuff like that too.
I'm not okay.
I'd like to hear Jay out. I don't even know what Jay's concern is.
No, I know exactly what Jay's concern is.
His average is what is he? 20. What's his average points this year? 26.
Jay, you're the one who says we have to project, like going out there.
I know, but I have him at 11. I mean, so he's still good.
No, I know,
but like, oh, he's top 5 no matter what. It's like, well, I mean, I
didn't say he's top 5 no matter what. He has it up.
You're putting words in my mouth.
But you have seen something. You have seen something.
What if I
play from a play-to-play perspective? Yeah, there's been some problems. One, he has one of the highest drop rates in the NFL from his receivers. His skill position players are not good. Like, they're just not. Like, Marvin Jones looks kind of washed.
I guess.
LaVisca's okay. Jamal Agnew's been their leading target getter. I understand the situation is not great for them right now, but from, like, just the eye test of watching what he's done, plus what we've seen. Yes, has he strung it together into a full game fantasy performance? No, not necessarily, but he's done it in NFL games. That Cincinnati game, he was good. The first game that they won, which I believe was against
Miami.
Was against Miami.
It was the London.
Yeah, he was Miami and London.
He was good in that game. So I get the situation is not good. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen the second half of this year. I think we're probably looking for some more changes going into next year, and particularly his third year, which is really the make or break year for most players in the NFL, especially quarterbacks. But like, given his pedigree, given the flashes that we've seen within games, and the improvement he's made from week to week for the most part, particularly around decision making, I am 100% on board with Trevor Lawrence. I'm not worried about him at all long term.
Yeah, it's not about. It's not. It's just more nuanced with me. It's more like I like to see something a bit more where I start pushing him over, guys. It's sort of like, can I'm not just gonna be like, we project, but we don't have to just. I don't know. It has to be balanced. I want to see a little bit more consistency. I think I've seen a little bit more from Fields, honestly, in the last 2 weeks than I've seen from Lawrence.
See, I just don't know that. I feel like I'm all projecting just based on some of the eye test with watching some of the plays that he can make. I guess I'm projecting on top of that, but just the ability that he has.
The plays that you guys have seen.
I've watched every single play in every single Jacksonville game. No,
I've watched a lot of Jacksonville.
Well, I mean, when I was thinking, like, think back to some of the people that have been really good from fantasy perspective for quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. I feel like we saw a little bit more early on from them, which I'm just I'm comparing it to other players.
And there was Baker Mayfield that, like, I remember after year one, people were all of a sudden like, is he the number 2?
Well, yeah, but then he regressed. I mean,
but are we being too cautious? Like, I don't. Yeah.
Well, no,
tough.
I'm just saying, like, what do you have to see to not have concern? Like, can you just blindly go like, no, I'm good? Or do you, like, because when I compare it to those players, I saw more. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, to be fair, was his second year.
It was his second year. He was in a playoff team already. Lamar Jackson was on the Baltimore Ravens. Justin Herbert, we know his situation. Also, like, I'm not putting Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they had some good offensive weapons, but like, also, I'm not like, we're talking about Justin Herbert as possibly being the number 1 guy. Like, he was that good. Like, I wouldn't have Trevor Lawrence over Justin Herbert anytime soon. But like, yeah, so it's great. Like, different players have emerged at different levels. Matthew Stafford early on, like, took him low going and to get going as a quarterback. Andrew Luck was pretty.
He was pretty good his first year.
He threw 20-something interceptions. He
threw a lot of picks, but like, I don't know. There was just more. I don't know.
I think Cam Newton was good right away.
Yeah, he was good right away.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that there has been deviation. There's been deviation.
My point is more of a pause of like, there was a ton of hype on Trevor Lawrence. A ton of like, can't miss. Like, there's no possible way this guy's bad. And I'm not saying he's bad.
Is that what? Because the expectations were too high?
It's just more of like, I still would like to see something before I'm like, I am so super confident in building my team around him as my number 1 quarterback, where I'm like, this is my draft is awesome. Like, this is my number 1.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, it works. I mean,
I still have him at 11, so that's.
I know you still have it there at 11, but it's a double-edged sword. You can say he has to show me something, but like, it's not like one. He has shown stuff. He's had plays on there, and like, that pedigree matters. The way he was built up as a can't miss, it was not out of thin air. It was not out of nowhere. So I'm just saying, like, we were all on top of him
all the time. Like, I mean, I'm just saying. I'm saying more of like a. I'm shaking a little bit to be like, oh, there's no way he can miss. The percentage goes down. You're at 100% or 95%. This guy can't miss. Now, maybe it's like 80-20. 85.
Yeah, but
that's what I'm saying. Like,
it's a vice versa. You're saying like, you need to see something to push him over, but like, you could say it's like
moved him. I think I had him at 10 before.
No, but like, let me get my point out. Like,
can I speak?
But you're arguing like I hate him. Like,
no, I'm not arguing, Jay. Let me get my point out. I know you're not hate him. I know you have him at 11. This is getting testy here. My point is, it's two sides to this. You're like, oh, I need something before I move him up. But most people, and this is including in just regular NFL analysts, not just like people who know quarterbacks, not just fantasy football analysts, are people who would be like, this is going to be the next guy. This is the guy with this pedigree. Couldn't you also say, don't deviate from your preseason analysis because the situation isn't ideal for him, particularly when it's not like he's been awful this season. Like I said, like stringing it together game to game in that terrible Jags offense with the coaching, with the people around him, with that O-line on there. Yeah, it hasn't always looked the greatest, but there have been moments, like I think of that Laviska Shenault 50-yard throw down the field and some other drives where he has put it together and looks like the real deal. Has it been for a whole game necessarily at this point? No, but I've seen drives where he's put it together. I've seen plays where he's made wow plays, and that is seeing something. Just because he doesn't put up a 40-point fantasy game doesn't mean he's not going to live up to that. I'm just saying, like, I am holding firm on Trevor Lawrence from where I had him before the season because I believe in that talent, and I have seen enough where I think he's going to get there. That's my point with this. Like, I'm not deviating because, yeah, he was drafted number 1 by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Wasn't going to be a great first season. That's just the reality.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely leaning to agree with more of that logic. But I do still agree with the sentiment of knowing that we've
stop playing both sides, Andrew. Make a hard decision.
I don't even know what I'm arguing
I
against. I'm like, didn't deviate, just a little shaken. That's
I'm the one who's the highest on him, I think.
Hey, you can shut the fuck up. Get out of here.
Gosh, can you go on mute again? Penny, can you start barking again so Josh has to go on mute? Yeah, but I do recognize that in years past, but I think for all the guys that we sort of like got way too high on, like the Bakers, the Carson Wentz was
the Brian Edwards.
Yes, the Brian Edwards. Like a lot of these guys, it's like they didn't quite have the pedigree. I feel like they were just someone who were like, they did really good their rookie year and they'll never do other than that. And I feel like this is sort of the opposite. And maybe you can be cautious, or cautiously optimistic, about that. But I think I lean fully on the pedigree of Lawrence and what I've seen when I've watched him. Mute. that I'm more likely to still go with it. I feel like he's worth the gamble if there is one.
I think we gotta end the show there. Sorry, Jay.
Agree with me.
Let's call it a day. That's it for a very contentious episode of the Brothers of Dynasty. I'm your host, Josh Christensen. This is my co-host, Penny. Thanks as always to my two brothers, Jay and Andrew. Thank you, Jay, I guess.
Well, fuck you, Josh. This is the beer I'm drinking. You can find me on Twitter at JAYC_DFF. You can find me on the better show to this show on Friday nights on the Going for Two Live network. It's the Fantasy Cheat
just
Sheet
shooting
podcast.
His way out of the Brothers of Dynasty.
This is all joking. Yeah, you can find me there, the Fantasy Cheat Sheet podcast on Friday nights at 8:30, writing at Going for Two. Yeah, check that all out. Yeah, and maybe check us out next week. We'll talk about something else. Maybe we won't fight.
I don't know.
Andrew, mute Josh. Yeah, I'm taking over hosting. Andrew, where can we find you? Tell us about your music.
Well, I plan on things getting real contentious when we talk about our top 25 tight ends.
Tight ends have to be double. You have to talk about
Josh is doubling over laughing too, but he's on mute, so you don't know how funny that was.
You guys kicked me off the show. I'm not saying anything for the rest of the show. Jay, it's your show now.
That's my show. Jay, Andrew, tell me more about it.
Okay. At @Drewc_music is the handle. You find that at Instagram and Twitter. The music that you hear at the top of the show is from my band Ghosts in the Snow. Find us at ghostinthesnow.com. That's where it links to Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, Bandcamp, all those places where you can support us. We got a show on Thursday. If you live in Rhode Island and you're hearing this at some point,
I don't
before
think anybody's
Thursday
still listening.
at dusk in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where we'll be playing, but we'll have more shows to come soon.
I like it. Josh is on Twitter. You can find him at DFFJChris. He talks about football there, mostly about Trevor Lawrence and Pat Freiermuth. That's pretty much all he talks about on Twitter. So if you want to hear about some hot takes about those guys, you can check him out there. And yeah, that's all Josh really has to say. But thanks for joining us tonight. We are the Brothers of Dynasty, and we will catch you next week. And it'll just be me and Andrew next week because Josh is off the show permanently. Thanks,
I quit!
everybody. Good night. Have a good one.
I quit!